It's been a real pleasure getting to know the panelists as we've prepared for this presentation. I am confident that you'll all take some time to look through their biographies. I think that one word that comes to my mind after reading all four of their biographies is the word triumphant, both in their recovery from their challenges, but also in the work that they're doing. One thing that they all have in common is that they're all certified peer specialists. Their expertise comes from their lived experiences, and I've always said that suffering tends to generate wisdom, and they're here today to share with you some of the wisdom that they were able to gain over the course of their illness and their challenges and their recovery. The first person I'd like to introduce who's going to share is Christi Collins. Christi?
Should I keep jumping or just go ahead and lower? A little bit of a height difference. Good afternoon. This may be inappropriate, but roll tide. I sure enjoyed that game. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. This is truly an honor and pleasure to be here. Like Joel said, we're going to speak about our jobs, certified peer specialist. I'm not a great or awesome speaker, but I am going to be talking about the one thing that I am so passionate about that you'll be able to feel it, I hope, from all of us. And so this is a wonderful opportunity. So let me just tell you a little bit about what I do. I was hired at NAMI back in 2009 to become their certified peer specialist. I was trained in 2008, and so I have the privilege of working with my peers in a couple of signature programs called NAMI, In Our Own Voice, and NAMI Connection Recovery Support Groups. So I was hired to coordinate those programs and grow them, and so that's what I've been involved with NAMI. And it's kind of grown. My job kind of grew outside of that even, and I became a state trainer. So I get to train certified peer specialists in Alabama. And so, matter of fact, I think all three may be here. I've helped train. And so that's been a privilege and an honor. And that kind of grew, and somehow I became a national trainer, and I've worked with other companies and been able to train veterans and other folks all over the country. It's such a rewarding thing to be able to do. And it's one of those things that I think without this job, I know I wouldn't be standing here. I'm sure of that. I want to backtrack just a little bit because I hope I look presentable and like I've had a bath and dressed up, but it didn't always look like this. There was a time in my life where I just lost life. And I thought it was enough if I could get to the point where I took my medicine and maybe took a bath every day. That was enough. And fortunately, a certified peer specialist came to speak at my day treatment. And this is many years ago. And she just came one time and spoke. It's the first one we had in the state of Alabama, Fannie Hicks. And she said, "You can have more. You know, or we were just having a group, you can have more." And I thought about it. I thought about it for about a week and about a month, and a few months went by, and I had kind of given up on life. I had given up on being able to have a relationship, being able to have a family, and just life in general. I didn't really have hopes and dreams. And it sparked that hope flame inside of me. And so then it kind of grew from there. And I'm going to try to wrap it up. I want to give these guys enough time to speak. But I want you to know that the single most important thing in my life soon to be 4 years old. At the end of the month, I have a son, and I have been in a relationship for 12 years. So, yeah. So it is really important that we focus on getting stable and meds and all these other things. But it can be so much more. We can be productive citizens that work and thrive and have the hopes and dreams that get filled. And so this is my passion. I'm not going to stop. Even if everybody fires me, I'm still going to be showing up because I'm not going to quit till we're there. Let's see here if I have forgotten anything. No, I will turn it over to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Thomson McCorkle. Thomson?
For many years, my mental illness was disabling, but recovery is possible. Through my own hard work and help from others, I'm now able to lead Wings Across Alabama. There are a few points about recovery that I can share from my personal experience. One is recovery is possible. At one point, I did not believe, I wasn't even able to perceive of recovery, but slowly I've gotten better. Recovery is a journey. There are ups and downs. I have good days and I have bad days. Recovery is not linear. Recovery is unique to each person. Everybody has to define recovery for themselves. My recovery is not everybody's recovery. It takes an entire team to have successful recovery. This means doctors, nurses, family, peers, friends, and others. I'm supported by many people and need different things from different people. In a peer relationship, both sides give and take. Peer services are good for the CPS providing the services, as well as the peer who is receiving the services. And it is my hope that more places, such as hospitals, group homes, etc., will employ peers to be a part of the recovery plan.
Thank you, Thomson. Our next two speakers are both peer support specialists from JBS, and they're going to dive a little deeper into the role of the certified peer specialist. Our next speaker is Justin Ward. Justin?
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone had a good lunch. First thing I want to do is I've got to make a statement. I promised a close friend that I'd start doing this every time I meet new people. I'm a survivor. My life, I've been through terrible things that most people honestly couldn't even fathom. But you know what? I'm here, I'm alive, and I'm striving, fighting, trying to do something that a lot of people in my life told me I would never be able to do. Peer support, to me, best way to sum it up, it saved my life. It started out, I've been in the hospital multiple times in my life. I've seen multiple therapists and whatnot. Never really clicked with me until a special peer specialist who used to work where I currently work told me that, hey, Justin, you're an amazing guy. You can do whatever you want in your life. Don't ever stop. When someone gets in your way, just push forward. With that, I take that into my life every time I need to. I take it to work with me. Even my peers that I speak to, I tell them anytime they tell me that they can't, I'm like, who says you can't? It's like truly the only person who's telling you that you shouldn't listen to in the end, everyone else, including yourself. It's like anytime you tell yourself that you can't, don't believe it. One of my role models since I was a little kid was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. A lot of times people are like, why is he your role model? It's like, he's just this fake guy or whatever. And I agree, to an extent he is, but you know, watching as he strived through life, even as an adult now, I was like, you know what? He is the best role model for me because of the fact that no matter what people told him, he just kept pushing forward. He released a video, which I recommend any of y'all to watch if y'all can, where he describes his personal issues that he's had with mental illnesses and whatnot, and yet everything he's done to push forward. I know for me, this past year, I had a close friend of mine I found out had committed suicide. A bunch of bands I like, suicide. That's another thing I'm passionate about regarding peer support, and it's something that I push more towards. I mean, it's like they say don't pick favorites and stuff like that, but I mean, for me, I try to push a little bit more towards the people who, when they come to me and they're like, I'm suicidal, at that point I'm like, you know what, it's like this person needs me right now. Because I know in the past I've had multiple suicide attempts and no one was there for me, I felt like, and I needed to be there for those people. That's actually why, if you look at my bio, I'm going to UAB to become a therapist. I want to be that person that other people can count on. Another thing that's interesting is I've talked to a couple of therapists and stuff, and they told me, they were like, honestly, I don't know a therapist that's a peer specialist as well. And I was like, you know, that's right. I've not met one either. Supposedly there is one in the state of Alabama, but I haven't met them yet. But one thing, though, that kind of ties in with suicide is I looked up some information recently because I went to this event. It's called, I believe, Out of the Darkness. It was a walk to build funds for suicide awareness and stuff. And some information they gave me had statistics for Alabama. I'd like to read over them real quick. Regarding suicide, right now, the third leading cause of death for people between the ages of 15 and 24. That's what it is. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. The fourth leading the fourth leading cause of death for people the ages 10 to 14. The fourth leading for 25 to 44. I mean, it's like, it's such a high. It's such a high level of death because of suicide, and it's kids. These are kids that I'm seeing this happen to, and it breaks my heart. I mean, it's like I talk to a lot of therapists, peer specialists, mental health professionals, and I ask them, I'm like, why is there not more support in the United States for kids? I mean, honestly. I work with my friend Avera here with kids, and some of their stories break my heart. And I'm like, who's there for them? And so, I mean, it's like, and not to mention, I work for JBS, and what they're doing right now gives me hope. Because for one thing, they're helping with the kids. They're also working with adults. They have this program where when I was working with this program, and what I would do is I'd go to group homes and, you know, take my time with the adults and just try to help them in a direction where they can end up like every one of us. They can have the life that they want, that they deserve. Because, I mean, for one thing, a lot of times, I'm sure in their life, they've had people saying, hey, you're not worth anything. Oh, you're just a bum. I mean, honestly, I know something I looked up because it was something important that part of me kind of forgot was the actual definition of a peer specialist. It's a person with significant life-altering experience. They support individuals with struggles pertaining to mental health, psychological trauma, or substance abuse. At that point, reading over that, I was like, in a way, everyone's a peer specialist. I don't see why we don't bring these people, each and every one of us, into these locations like the prison system or even like schools. I know one thing, since I've been a student at UAB, something that I found that was awesome is that at the school, they have a counseling program that's ran, like they have mental health professionals doing it, but they also have peer specialists basically assisting with it. And I was like, that's awesome that they have that. Because you wouldn't think that like a lot of schools would have that. By the way, so you know, any of you UAB people out there, thank you so much for what y'all do regarding the health programs there. They're fantastic. But I mean, it's like, in all honesty, it's gonna sound a little bit harsh, but it took a peer specialist at JBS and a therapist at UAB to tell me that, hey, Justin, mental health right now is not, like, as a profession, it's not great. It's not where it needs to be. Listening to everyone talk here and stuff, we're in the right direction. I just hope that soon things get pushed forward a little bit quicker, because, I mean, it's like seeing these statistics of kids killing themselves, God knows what else is going on. I mean, it's like, I know for me, I didn't have anybody growing up. And I don't want people feeling like that. Even adults, it's like everyone should feel like they have somebody. And that's why I think peer support is extremely important, because that gives them that person that they care about. I mean, what's stopping these companies from doing that and stuff? It's like, for one thing, I mean, it's like, I don't know about a lot of peer specialists, but if it came down to it, I'd probably do it for free if it meant I saved a life. So, I just want to say thank you guys for everything. Oh, real quick, go Blazers.
Thank you, Justin. Our next speaker is Avera Guthrie. Avera?
Hey y'all. Even with heels, I'm gonna have to pull it down a little. I promise I don't have my phone up to check text messages like some millennial. I am a millennial. My phone is pink. I'm really bad with time, so I'm gonna time myself so that I get to each point I wanna make in a reasonable amount of time. Otherwise, I would just continue on for a long, long time. So my story is a little different from many peer specialists in this state, because I think that my story starts a few generations back. My grandparents and my great-grandparent, one of them, all had mental illness diagnoses, and all went on to do great things while quietly suffering. And they all had addictions when they died. Every single one of them. And they all died from those addictions. So whether it was alcohol or drugs, they died from complications of those addictions. So of course, my parents, both of them, didn't stand a chance. So both my parents were addicts. And as many of you know, addicts are very rarely present. So when addicts have children, children frequently feel like parents aren't part of the picture. And that's where my personal story starts, is that I felt like my parents weren't part of the picture. So on top of my family having addiction problems, my family also has problems with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, depression, many other things, but mainly bipolar disorder and depression and anxiety, but like, who doesn't have anxiety these days? So when I grew up, I have an older brother. He's 4 years older than me, and right now that I'm almost 30, he's my best friend, but I think any of us who have older siblings know that when we're young, like, they hate you for whatever reason, like, 'cause you're not cool. Also, you were really good friends with my friend's older brother, and that, like, made me think about it. It's like, hey, it's nice to see you again. It's great. I went to Mountain Brook as well. So when my dad got sober, truly sober, healthy sober, when I was around 9. But my mom decided, who was very sick at the time, decided that she didn't want us to have any contact with him. My mom continued using till I was about 12 and then got clean when I was 12. And I'm gonna make a very hard distinction between clean and sober, because you can be clean and still unhealthy, and still living in that place of addiction, and still living in that place of harm, and that place of hate, and that place of just hurtfulness. And so that's where I grew up. It was with 2 missing parents, and then a divorce, and then 1 missing parent and 1 court-ordered parent who couldn't come close to me. So when I was 13 or so, 14 or so, I was a competitive dancer. I did ballet, and I was a competitive horseback rider because it wasn't enough to just be a teenager. And thanks, Mom. And so, of course, as any good ballet dancer does, I developed an eating disorder. And I was really lucky at 13 to not already have a substance abuse problem. And I am really lucky today to not have a substance abuse problem. For some amazing reason, only one of my 13 cousins has a substance abuse problem. The rest of us came out scotch-free, which is incredible. Scotch-free. I'm so glad a couple of you caught that. Also, my brother's a comedian in Chicago. I had to try. So at 13, 14, when I got an eating disorder, I also picked up tendencies towards self-harm, which kind of go hand in hand. I think an eating disorder is self-harm. I think most people do it to hurt. I don't think they do it to fit. I didn't do it to fit a certain mold. I did it to hurt myself because I didn't feel worthy. And you can't feel worthy in that situation. You can't grow up feeling worthy with parents who aren't there, or parents who can't be there. And I think it's important to like underline that my parents couldn't be there. They would have chosen to if they could have been. So when I was 17 and I was deep in all this competition and all this, self-worth being caught up in horses and caught up in ballet, I did a move in ballet and I tore my groin muscle and I hurt it rip. And I couldn't walk for a few days. And the doctor said, you can't dance anymore. And I just said, well, I have to. Who am I gonna be if I can't dance? So I did. And then the doctor said, you're not gonna walk again if you dance. And I said, well, you don't know me, because I was 17. And he was right. So I didn't dance again. And so I started riding horses, but I had failed so deeply at something that I loved that suddenly I couldn't jump anymore in my horses because I was terrified that I was gonna fail again. And I did. I fell because I was scared of failing, so I stopped everything, and my eating disorder just got out of control. And I dropped down to like 95 pounds at 17 years old, failed out of high school, was doing terribly. And I was diagnosed with depression somewhere in there, and I was put on antidepressants and just got so depressed and suicidal and manic, and I kept getting really manic and self-harming and not eating for 3 days and no sleep, like not sleeping and just doing terrible, terrible things and like spending a whole bunch of money on a credit card I stole and then having to return it all before my dad found out, and I ran away from my mom's house because she kicked me out, and I lived with my dad, and then Mom came back in the picture, and it was just a mess, y'all. Like, teenagers who are like, my life is a mess. It was a mess. Okay, well, as a 27-year-old, my life is a mess. And so when I was 19, the doctor said, you know what, you don't have depression, you have bipolar disorder. You should have been on a mood stabilizer, and it's amazing you haven't killed yourself. And I was like, not for lack of trying. And so by that point, the psychiatrist got a hold of my family and said, hey, look, you got to put her in treatment. And I said, okay. And there I went, and then I got out and tried to commit suicide, and then I went back, and I got out, and I got a degree in sociology. I compete now with my horses. I got back in it. I don't jump anymore. I do a different kind of riding. I teach horseback riding, and I do equine therapy. But more importantly, I work at Hillcrest with teenagers. So when they say, oh, my life sucks, I'm like, oh, mine too. You know, and they get to be like, my parents are the worst, and I get to be like, oh my God, same. And we do this all the time. And I work, the program that I work in was started November 12th, 2014 by Audrey Tripp with JBS. And Kim Hammock helped so much. And of course, Karen Fowler helped so much. And we provide services to inpatient teens, which is a very rare thing. And we're in some seriously uncharted territory. And my peer specialist work looks a little different because I work mostly with trauma. Very, very little of my work is like, oh, you have schizophrenia, let me help you work through that. They have tons of people at their disposal to help with that. I work with, hey, I don't know what it looks like to have a friend that I don't think I'm dating. And I say, okay, well, you don't have to date everybody you want to hang out with. And they're like, okay. And so my job is to set boundaries with them, and Justin works with me, and we worked at a group home for a while, and we worked on a unit called the RISE unit, and we pulled back from the group home and expanded to another residential treatment facility, or treatment unit in the same facility. And the RISE unit is, well, I describe it to my friends as the worst and the worst, and I follow it up really quickly as, but they're like my faves. So they're my favorite. I love those girls. And they really just, they have all the potential in the world and no one to tell them that. And I see every day them be told, you're not gonna do it. You're just not capable. And even the therapist sometimes will say these things without any realization that like they are capable, they just maybe need a little different help than adults do. And you know, they need little things like how do you put your makeup on so that when you go into a job interview, you don't look like you're going in a job interview at a slightly different place? Like, how do you apologize to somebody that you told, you know, should go rot in hell? Like, how do you say sorry about that? Or how do you say sorry to a staff member that you probably shouldn't have yelled at? Those are the kind of things that we work with with them as a peer specialist. So we get to say, hey, I know it's hard to apologize because I had a really hard time apologizing too when I got in fights when I was 17 because I thought I ruled the world. But you gotta do it sometimes. And I know it sucks that your family isn't there. And I know it feels really hard that you don't have anyone to go home to in Christmas. But hey, girl, you got me. And I hope that right now, in this moment, for 5 minutes, that's okay. And sometimes we see a difference, and sometimes, well, sometimes we have weeks like this week. But I don't know. They're my faves. So I hope it stays that way. I hope it gets bigger and gets a little better from here on out. And we just moved on to a bigger unit and expanded to boys. We have Justin to help me with that. Yeah, it's a little awkward to go into a group with a bunch of boys and say, we're going to talk about safe sex. You know, they all look at me like, not with you, I'm not. So Justin has taken over a little bit with the boys. So I'm there a lot, but I don't really have a lot to do with that one. But we moved on to RTC Girls, which is a little bit of a step-down unit. Those girls are mostly there from running away from their foster homes, as opposed to like really deep psychosis or trying to harm a family member or more criminal offenses. They're mostly there for running or just less violent offenses. And I do say offenses. I think that that's a really important word to use because they are treated like criminals. And most of the girls do have criminal histories. So this unit, though, this expansion onto this unit has been incredible. I think it was just the right move, and programs like this need to be on units like that. And it's just really, it's been so life-changing, I think, to kind of see kids who I could have so easily been if DHR had just been called at just the right moment. That could have been me, and it would have been y'all. I was not a nice kid. Like, I was not a nice kid. I got in fights all the time. And if I hadn't had family that was there to vouch for me, I would have been that kid. And it's nice to see now that that kid has someone to talk to. And it's not always me. Sometimes the kid doesn't connect with me. But sometimes it's Justin. Sometimes it's another girl that I work with or another girl that I work with. But it's someone. And you probably can't tell, but I'm very passionate about this. And I really just could go on for hours. In fact, my friends think it's really boring because they hear about it all the time. And I love it so much. And I see where this is all going, and I see the movement towards such a different place than where it was 10 years ago when I didn't have options. And just as an aside, my parents are doctors, so my stepmom, my dad, and my mom all work in the medical field. Well, my mom is a psychologist, so they all work in a medical field. So when I went to treatment, I couldn't stay in Alabama. So I don't have any peer specialists from Alabama that helped me out, like these guys did. So I had one peer specialist help me out, and it was when I was climbing at a climbing gym, going on some bizarre rant about something with one of my friends, and this tiny little thing poked her head out from around a wall and said, "I have a job for you." And I was like, "What?" And she said, "If you'll take this job, you're gonna love it." And I was the first person hired for this new program, and it has changed my life. It was my first full-time job right out of college, and just Audrey Tripp is the one who started it. And if Audrey Tripp hadn't just like popped out from behind this wall, I don't know. I don't know that I would be this successful. I think I would be like every other one of my friends right out of college and be working at a restaurant, kind of confused and hopeless. So thank you, Karen. But that's it. I think I'm out of time at this point. Thank you guys so much. I hope that I got across how much I love my job and my kids.
Okay, I wanted to, as the moderator, just ask a couple questions, dig just a little deeper into this role as a peer specialist. How do you, when you approach someone you're working with, how different is that than your colleagues who are professionals?
Oh, me?
Well, any one of you.
Do you mean like would you, in my situation, like the staff at the hospital?
Yeah.
Well, because I work with teenagers, as you guys probably noticed, I very intentionally use language that's pretty like hip, because when I work with my teenagers, they say things like fave and lit and things like that. And I'm not sure I would know those words if I didn't work with them. So when I approach my the kids I work with, I use a totally different set of language. But when I approach staff and the adults that I work with, it really is with a sense of just kind of timidness almost, just very much a sense of like, I'm not here to step on your toes, I'm not here to do your job, I'm not here to tell you you're wrong, I'm not here to tell you you're worthless. I'm here to be your ally and to help you and to listen to your concerns and to maybe show you something you didn't know or maybe gently disagree. But it's a little different for me than it is with other peer specialists because I work in a bit of a vacuum. So I see the same staff and I see the same nurses and I see the same psychiatrists and the same therapists every day, 8 hours a day.
Do you get involved in helping the staff diagnose a patient?
We are allowed in treatment team. I personally try to stay out of diagnosis because the children have such a tight relationship with us that if I just on the just off chance said, well, maybe you're a little depressed, that would be it. They would be like, I'm depressed. And that would, and if the doctor who's much more qualified said you have schizophrenia, they'd be like, I'm depressed. So we shy away from using any clinical terms at all.
I've heard in the past from some of my colleagues that peer specialists try to really be strength-based, to focus on the strengths. Is that a part of your training as a certified peer specialist?
Oh, yeah.
I agree with that. I know, for one thing, as part of the job, even a lot of times you're pointing, like you said, you're pointing towards the strengths of the person. You're trying to lift them up. And the same thing goes through the training. I know for me personally, there was one point in the training that we were talking about trauma. And at the time, I was dealing with some personal stuff. And one of the trainers came up to me and helped me along with it and helped explain that, hey, you're going to have people that go through this, and I want to show you how to handle this. So
As peers, we want other peers, the people we're providing services to make positive decisions for themselves and strive toward their interests. And so if somebody says, I want to go back to school, we want to help them do that. If somebody says, I'm not feeling well, we want to try to identify with them. So sometimes I don't feel well also. So we want to, like everyone has said, we want to build people up.
Do you ever share your story, your own story? Can you speak to that, someone? Christi, hasn't spoken yet.
Okay. Yes, I frequently share my story, or if not the whole story, a little piece of it, just enough that my peer can relate and know that I've been there, maybe not the exact situation, but something similar, and that I'm not judging them, and they can open up and feel free to do that, and that they're not alone.
That's because for many years, it seemed like professionals, just by their training, were sort of taught not to share personal experiences with the people they were working with. But you're free to do that, and that's encouraged, and that makes that relationship more identifiable with one another. I see. Okay. Someone talked about being sort of walking with the person. But do you see yourself as a companion more than a therapist? Or
So for me, a lot of times I try to, we do set boundaries, but I found that they tend to open up more when you treat them like a friend, just be there for them. Because for one thing, if you treat them like they're a patient, they're going to react like a patient. They're going to shut off. They're going to be all quiet and paranoid, and they just don't want to talk to you. But I know for me, a lot of times when I'm talking to the girls or the guys, I'll talk about my hobbies, I'll talk about music, and they'll quickly open up and they'll be like, oh man, that reminds me of this time about blah, 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 blah. And I'll be like, yeah, exactly. It's like, I understand what you're coming from. And I know for me, something that helped me, I had a therapist that I was seeing for a period of time, and my psychiatrist as well. Both of them openly came out and said, I have a diagnosis. They told me a little bit about their personal lives and stuff, just enough to where I'd open up, because they knew if they didn't open up at all, I wouldn't either. It's like, for me, I'm super shy at times, but as soon as somebody tells me a little bit, it's like I'll just open up completely. So, I mean, it's a trust thing, and that's why when it comes to working with the peers, you just got to build that level of trust with them.
okay. For people in the audience who are not familiar with the Certified Peer Specialist program, could someone speak to the training you receive and where you get that training?
I'm a new certified peer specialist. I received my certification, I think in September, but the training was in August. It was a week-long training, and thank you to the state of Alabama. Room and board and the training are provided for free, so that's really great. We spent 5 days, or maybe 4 days. We arrived on Monday and left on Friday, but training was only 4 days. And so we have a manual. The course was taught by Appalachian Consulting Services. That's a group out of Georgia. Georgia has a great peer program and a great peer model, so Alabama looks to them in many ways.
Okay. Anything else anyone wants to add? Now,
Christi was a trainer at the peer training.
okay.
So when I get my little hands on my youth peer specialist, I take everything that, of course, that they learn in their CPI training, so certified peer specialist. Whoa, wrong CP training. Their CPS training, which is a certified peer specialist training, and I then have to retrain them a little bit for what we do, because we have slightly different boundaries and we have slightly different relationships with staff, and so our training actually lasts. How long did I train you after I got hold of you?
Because I'm retired.
Yeah, I have to drag them around the hospital with me with different colored badges and no keys, and just like they're attached at my hip for, I think it's 3 weeks with the women that I hire, and I think it was a month and a half or a month with you. So training to be a youth peer specialist inside the hospital is arduous and probably very annoying. I was really excited, so I don't actually remember being trained. It was just like a fog of excitement, but I can imagine it was probably very arduous.
This is a program, though, that's supported by the State Department of Mental Health, correct? The training?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No, my training is separate, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about your role, especially as in the context of the community? Because there's been a lot of discussion about how we can improve community relationships. Would anyone like to speak to that?
I said once before, but I'll say again, I hope that peers become more involved and are hired at more places, whether it's, I don't know, a Fortune 500 company or a hospital or a group home. I think that peers can relate in ways that other types of professionals cannot relate.
And I'd like to say that JBS has an awesome program. I think you guys are around 23 peer specialists, maybe, give or take. And so there are areas that do not have nearly that, or no peer specialists at all. And this is one of those programs that work. It's successful. We're products of it, and we see it all the time. So I hope that more communities and the mental health centers will embrace it, grow it. If you don't have but one or two, grow it. If you don't have any, Yes.
Okay. Well, I was asked to wrap up the program, so I'm going to just say a few words. And it's been my experience that peer specialists have helped to humanize the clinical environment. And I think for many of us who received services in the past, we realized that the diagnosis was sort of paramount. And that's dangerous. When you go into an environment, a clinical environment, where the diagnosis is paramount, people begin to believe that their role is their diagnosis. People who have spent time in clinical environments come out of those environments, and when they come up to introduce themselves, they'll say, "Hello, my name is Joel, and I'm schizophrenic." Because that's what they've learned. They've defined themselves by the environment that they lived in. I remember this quite well when I was a patient, when I was a rookie patient, and I first was being admitted to the hospitals. The staff would always encourage me to go into the day room and meet the other patients. And the first question all the other patients would ask me is, Joel, what's your diagnosis, man? What's your diagnosis? And when I was a rookie patient, I'd say, well, I have a little schizophrenia and a little depression. And the veteran patients in there, they said, so what, man? Everyone in here's got some of that stuff. Change the channel, But when I became a veteran patient and I learned the ropes of the clinical environment, when I would go into these new hospitals and go in and meet the patients and they'd say, Joel, what's your diagnosis? I'd give them the longest, most intractable diagnosis in the DSM-3. I mean, their eyeballs would get real big and they'd look at me and go, you really got all that stuff, man? And I'd go, you're damn right I do, and don't you forget about it either. And as a result, I had more value in that treatment environment based solely on my diagnosis. The problem is that when you leave the hospital, a diagnosis has no value. As a matter of fact, it has negative value. And I remember one time I was up in Lansing, Michigan, sort of readjusting to living outside of the hospital, reintegrating. And I went to this party with some friends, and I remember meeting this woman, and she was very friendly, and she was talking to me, and she said, my name is Nancy, and I work over here in the Human Resources Department at Michigan State. What's your name? And I said, my name is Joel. And she says, well, what do you do here in Lansing? And I says, well, I'm the schizophrenic. And all I remember is there was this poof, and she was gone, But the minute we begin defining ourselves by our diagnosis, we're throwing shade on our own humanity. We're minimizing our own humanity. We become this clinical jargon rather than this human being, and it takes the air out of us, takes the spirit out of us, because there's not a whole lot to drive a person when you're just schizophrenic. There's not a whole lot to talk about. There's not a lot to brag about. There's not a lot to share about that helps to build relationships. I think what we're learning, and I think that the certified peer specialists bring this, is they're teaching the system to look at the whole person, looking beyond the clinical environment. We talk about respecting clients and patients and peers. Well, if you approach the people you serve and you're only trying to figure out what's wrong with them, you're not going to treat them with respect. They're not going to feel it. I mean, if I came in here and looked out at all at you and wondered, well, what's wrong with you all? Gosh, there must be a syndrome. There must be some category I can put you in that has to do with the illness. You're not going to feel respected by me. But when I approach you and I look at you and I see beyond the diagnosis and I see the whole person and I see the strengths and I see the spirit in you and the potential, then that person is going to feel respect. And I believe that respect is the catalyst to recovery. There's another dynamic that lies in between called resilience. And resilience is this ability to sort of manage through very difficult circumstances. Some people say to bounce back. But sometimes that resilience, especially when you're sick, is dormant. I've told people it's sort of like sometimes that resilience is like a lost and frightened child. It doesn't know what direction to run into. It's not until someone, perhaps just like yourself, approaches that individual. And the minute you treat them with respect, you spark that resilience. That resilience takes a step forward. You know, it shows its face, and it's at that time you can begin to build a relationship. I also believe that peer specialists play a role in recovery, and the more people that we have in recovery, the more people we have circulating in the community, the more opportunities we have to eliminate stigma. Because my belief is that yes, there are many things that everyone in this audience can do to help eliminate stigma. But I believe that if we're really going to eliminate it, it's up to the people here up at the table. It is our responsibility to cleanse ourselves of any self-directed stigma so that when someone else treats us with stigma, there's nothing for it to resonate with inside us. If you already stigmatize yourself and go out into the community, it really doesn't matter what anyone else does because you're already stigmatized. One of the ways to cleanse that self-directed stigma is for people to stand up and tell their story. And you all experienced that this morning. When people can confidently and comfortably articulate their stories, they're going to feel better about themselves. They're taking something that was in the dark and bringing it into the light. And for many of us, that's what recovery is all about. And we talk about community and so forth. Well, you know, healthy communities create opportunities for people to share their stories with each other. That's what engenders empathy, is when you hear someone else's lived experience. And the more people who can stand up at the podium and tell their story, or who at any kind of function can confidently and comfortably share their story, they're eliminating stigma. They're showing that they're comfortable in their own skin, and you can be too. Maya Angelou said that there's no greater agony than to carry around an untold story. But that's what many of us do, because we're afraid that if we tell our story, someone's going to make a judgment about us. They're going to stigmatize us. They're going to mark us. You know, they're not going to want to be our friends. But the fact is that when we tell our story and we get it out of our system and we get comfortable with it, we allow people to see us for who we are. We're not hiding anymore. And I believe that that's the key to destigmatizing mental illness. It's the secret, perhaps. It's not what everyone else will do. It's actually what we're going to do. Okay, about ourselves and how we see ourselves. And once we cleanse ourselves of all this self-directed stigma, it's not going to matter what anyone else does. Now, if you want to talk about discrimination, that's another subject, okay? But when it comes to stigma and prejudice, we play just as an important role in eliminating it as everyone in the room does. So, you know, I believe that the peer specialist program, it brings humanity, it adds a whole nother perspective. And sometimes when I sit back and get philosophical, I wonder what would the mental health system look like if peer support specialists started it off? You know, I remember one time I got into a big debate up in Washington, D.C. The head of the American Psychiatric Association came in and was bragging about how they had sold like 680,000 DSM-2s or 3s, whatever it was at the time. And I just said, you know, that's great. But in that DSM, 90% of what you look for are syndromes, you know, weaknesses, problems. And what if 90% of it looked at people's strengths, so that when we approach people, when we begin to look at someone, we immediately start connecting with, gosh, what's that potential that they have? What's that strength that they have that we can work with? Because in the end, I can tell you it's those strengths that will help people to recover. It's that potential. So I believe that the work that these folks are doing, and I have benefited the most, believe me, of having time to chat with these folks on the phone, to get to know them better. As I said at the beginning, their stories are full of being just triumphant, overcoming, but now they're giving back. They're not waiting for years either to take what they learned while they were in their experience and then transform it into something positive for others. They're doing it immediately, and they're fresh, and they bring that freshness to our system. So with that, I want to thank every one of our panelists here, and I want to thank everyone for listening today. Thank you.